So we're going to talk about drive team practice and execution. Cool. So what's the drive team? I'm not going to go too much because hopefully if you're here, you at least sort of know what the drive team is. But just in general, how most teams do it, you get your driver, right? They're the ones driving the robot, controlling where it goes on the field. That's like at the core, right? Every driver is going to do that. Some teams will decide to put more controls onto their driver. Kind of depends on your robot, how easy it is to load up more things for that driver to think about, as well as, just each team does it differently. The co-driver or the operator is everything else. So again, it's going to vary year to year how much is on that operator. Some years, like for example, this year for Team 930, wasn't too much. It was like intake out, intake in. The end game, that was pretty much it. You go to years like 2019 where there's an elevator in 6 different positions and 2 different intakes, and that co-driver had like buttons for everything. Varies year to year. Your human player, right? They're interfacing with the field. Again, varies from the year. Was anybody here the human player this year? Awesome, you got to make the shot. You got to interact with the cargo. Yeah. Which I mean, hey, when it works, you're the star of the show, which is awesome. Different games, sometimes you get to go out on the field, like 2017. Sometimes you play with the remote, and that's it, like 2008. Who knows what First wants to do? Then your technician, right? That's a relatively recent addition. Within the last 3 or 4 years, First added the technician as an actual role. Which has been a huge help, right? It's another person out there. Oftentimes this is going to be like, if you've got a lot of programming people on the drive team, this could be somebody mechanical focused to help watch the robot, or vice versa. It's just another person. What we stress with our technician is like, hey, the drivers, the co-driver, everybody that's on the field, they're playing the game. Our technician, you're watching that robot, and you're the one watching if a wheel pops off or something sounds weird. They're the ones making those notes, and they've got that checklist ready to go after the match is over. And lastly, the coach, they're kind of orchestrating, right? Orchestrating not only within their own team, but the whole alliance as well. The drive team, they're really your representation at a competition. They're the ones who are going to be interacting the most with other teams, especially when it matters the most, like trying to win matches or win the competition. So that's just something you have to keep in mind if you're a drive team member. You are representing your team. And with that comes a lot of a higher expectation for the drive team. You got to be willing to come and practice a lot. You got to be willing to put in those extra hours to make sure that your team is set up for success. So we'll talk just a little bit about some of the different methods of doing driver tryouts, doing driver practice. What things you can do to set your team up for success. So what is the point of drive team tryouts? Right, you're trying to make sure that your group of people who are out there and really the whole team is in their hands each match. They are well fit for the roles and they're well fit to represent the team. When you're doing tryouts, you want to practice that as much as possible. So something we like to do is pair up different types of people, right? Here's the people who are interested in driver, here's the ones interested in co-driver. Do different pair-ups. How 2 people interact is just as important as their own skill levels. You can have the most talented people, but if they don't get along well together and they're constantly fighting, you're not going to do well in a match. Like on 65, 74, fair and earnest, 930 is the same way. Anybody can try out for either side of the driver or operator, or even human player for that matter. You want to try and do this as early as possible. It's much easier said than done. We all know how build season goes. It gets crazy, it gets stressful, it gets a lot of things come up. But the sooner that you can do this, the more time you get just practicing, right? Both of our teams, we did that by the end of week 3. I know some teams, I think Wild Staying talked about, they pick theirs in the fall or in the spring for the next year, and they just practice. They get literally hundreds of hours of practice with their driver on a robot. So by the time that driver gets to competition, it's just natural. It's second nature. So a few of the types of drive trials that we've done in the past. Your classic slalom, right? You just drive the robot in and out of cones or obstacles or garbage cans, like in our case, and you just go without trying to hit something. Sometimes we've timed it, right? You add a time penalty if they hit an obstacle. It kind of adds a level of like stress to it. You want to put a little bit of stress on your drivers while they're trying out to make sure that they can do well under pressure. So some of the key things, if you are, you're running those, or maybe if you are trying out for the drive team and you want to do well, you got to find the right balance of smooth and fast. You want to be fast, you don't want to just be feathering it around. You got to be smooth too. If you're barreling through everything, not controlled, not going to work out too well. How do they react, right? When you're on the drive team, things go wrong. That's just what happens. You miss a cargo, you pick the wrong color up, you run into a robot, or you get defense, whatever. If you can just shake that off, move on to the next thing, that's going to be a really good sign for competition. And lastly, we often do like 2 attempts in this. How does the driver change in between attempts? Let's say they do the first attempt and it's okay. Do they improve? Do they learn like, oh, I kept taking this turn too sharp and I kept hitting that. Have I learned and I fixed that the next time? In real competition, you're always having to watch and learn what happened in the last match. How can we improve for the next one? You're always trying to improve. Another one that we've done is putting basically to try and get the co-driver in control of the robot. So not only just the co-driver controls, right? Often it's a little difficult. You can take a driver and just have them drive the robot. Easy peasy. If you have the co-driver just sit there and make your elevator go up and down or just put your intake in and out, it's not very fun. You're not going to learn a lot. So what we've done sometimes is have the co-driver be in charge of instructing what the driver does. So maybe we have one of the mentors is the driver and they just do exactly what the student tells them to do. And we'll just kind of make up something that there's a little bit of thought behind it. So I think what we did in this GIF here was we had 8 cargo out and we had a pattern of which ones they needed to pick up. And the driver didn't know what it was, the co-driver would have to direct them, okay, which ball is it? How do you tell them? How do you communicate that? How do you work with the driver? Because oftentimes that's one of the strengths, that's one of the key things of a good co-driver is their scope is a little bit larger, right? The driver's like, my robot, how do I not hit things? The co-driver needs to be looking around a little bit more, communicating where the next game piece is, if there's a defender coming in, and so practicing that communication, balanced with still, hey, I gotta look at my robot and press the button to put the intake out or to score the game piece. As well as, you throw in a couple curveballs. So that's part of the fun part. If you're the one running the driver test, is you can throw something in there, go kick the ball out of the way, or just do something to throw them off their game and see how they react to that. All right, so once you've picked your drive team, next is the drills, right? It's just like a sport. You need to practice in order to get good at it. Just so you gotta sprint around and practice doing free throws in order to get good. The same thing is true about the muscle memory of a drive team, any part of it. You also get that experience of what can go wrong. If you've driven your robot twice in the shop and then you get out to the real competition, the first match could be, oh man, I didn't know that a ball could get in the intake that way and get stuck. What do I do? And you might spend the rest of the match driving in circles trying to figure it out. If you've got dozens and dozens of practice matches under your belt, you've probably seen the cargo get stuck this way. You've probably seen the robot get up on top of a ball and be like, how do I get off of this? And so that's why it's super, super valuable. It's also good to balance what the type of drive team drills are. So for example, it could be something very simple, like just scoring a single element. So in 2019, we did a lot of practice of just drive up, pick up the hatch, the big plastic donut, just drive up, pick it up, back away. And then we would reset and just drive up, pick it up, back away. And it was just that just drilling in that muscle memory of how do you drive really, really fast right until you're up by the wall, and you slow down and very controlled get that. And so just over and over and over and over again, you build that muscle memory. You also then, you mix that in with some larger things, right? So in 2019, it was like fill the entire rocket, which would take like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. This year would be the equivalent of, hey, just go out there for like a 2-minute match and just score cargo like the whole time. You want to make them as realistic as possible. It's a little difficult depending on your space, right? There's a lot of factors. If you don't have space to put a full-size field or even a half-size field, it's still good to, as best you can, put things in the right spots. Because otherwise, you might have the world's best driver that could pick up a cargo and drive 2 feet and score it into the lower hub, and they did that all day long, and then they get to competition, you go, wow, this is like 30 feet away. This is nothing like what I practiced. So try and do that. Same with the vision. That's another key one. So in 2017, for example, the game, the playing field had these huge airships in the way, like right in the middle of the field. And so when we practiced, we'd set up just in a big empty space, and we just use big like poster boards, and we'd put them there to practice, hey, when I drive from this corner of the field to that corner of the field, I'm going to lose sight of my robot for a bit. And you don't want to practice that you have perfect vision and everything, get to competition, and have that be different. Make it as realistic as possible. Another excellent thing to practice is just your simulated matches. So again, depends a little bit on what's available in terms of space and other things, but just running as much as you can with real practice gives you the most realistic to what the actual competition is going to be like. Having a defender robot there is one of the most valuable things. Something that we each year try and get better and better at is throw a defender bot on. Especially if you have like one-on-one, if you can get your drive team to be able to spin away and to get around a defender that has no other purpose during that practice match than blocking your robot, you're going to be in a really good spot on the actual competition field when you're not going to be the only other robot there. Again, practicing things as close to a real match as possible. It's those little details that really set those teams apart. So again, it's not just, hey, I'm going to score cargo for 2 minutes, but where is my robot going to start at the beginning of that 2 minutes and 15 seconds, right? Run your autonomous. It's a good practice for your programmers to run the autonomous a whole bunch of times and see what happens. But also, all right, I know my robot starts here. That's when I walk up, I grab my controls. Don't just practice, cool, scoring, right? And then you get the buzzer beater shot, and you're like, awesome. But then you forgot to leave time to go climb. This is how you start to like get that internal sense of, cool, I can get one more shot off before I got to go over to the hangar and do this. It's a super valuable skill to have. I don't know if it's in here later or not, but that's how you that's how you see the good teams of competition that can line up, clamp on the bar, and they're hanging at like the very last second. One extra cycle could mean the difference between winning a match, losing a match, or winning the whole competition. So we'll talk a little bit about prepping for the tournament as a drive team. So before the event even happens, there's a lot of prep work that can go on. If you were in Aiden session before this, you probably heard all about prepping your strategy and your scouting and all that kind of stuff. The drive team has the same kind of things, but with just a little bit different focus. So you want to be watching like what are the good teams doing, especially if you're not competing until a little bit later. If you're at a week 1 event, then you're just in the same boat as everybody else. You get to go there and figure it out with the rest of us. But there's even still week 0 competitions you can watch in that. And you kind of have to watch matches. At least I find myself, I'll watch matches like 2, 3, 4 times. Because I'll watch it once, and I'll go, cool, Citrus Circus has a really cool robot, and I'll just watch it. And I go, oh, wait, I didn't pay attention to how they won. And so then I'll go watch it again. And it's learning not just, like, what are they doing, but why are they doing that? And it's a lot of subtleties, right? They don't just, in the stream, be like, and now Citrus Circuits is going to drive to this side of the field in order to leave room for the, like, I wish they did. That'd be awesome. They don't. So you got to kind of watch, where's the good team doing? What are their partners that leads to a successful alliance strategy? And it's not just something at the beginning of the competition season, but throughout, right? Week 1 competitions and week 3 competitions, vastly different. You get to weeks 4, 5, 6 when teams have competed 2, 3, 4 times in districts. The game meta just changes all over the place. So it's really important to be reviewing this throughout the entire season. Read the rules. Don't show up and not read the rules. What we do with our team is the Wednesday night right before the competition, we sit down with the drive team and we have a rules cram sesh again. As part of our drive tryouts, actually, I make a big long 6-page take-home test of all the rules and all these different things. So I'll take all the field drawings and blank it all out and say, okay, write in all the field things. All the different penalties, what gets you each penalty, what's the value of each penalty, foul, tech foul, etc. We do that all as a requirement for trying out. It helps us it makes everybody know the rules, and it kind of helps us say, hey, do you really want to be on the drive team, or are you just I want to drive the robot for 5 minutes and then never drive it again? So it's a little bit of both. All of the people who have tried out and then get on the drive team have gone through that. So we want to make sure we review it so it's fresh in our minds. And then also, prep out your processes as a drive team. A great example that may not be obvious at first is, what's the process for somebody sees something, right? Let's say that the drive team, the robot's out there, you're in a match, and you don't leave enough time to go climb at the end, right? If somebody in the stands sees that, is your process for everybody in the stands to come down the pit and say, hey, why didn't you climb earlier? You lost the match because of this. Spoiler, not a great way to interact with your drive team, who's probably feeling bad about themselves if they miss something in the match. Each team, does it unique. For some of the teams, that's the coach role, whether it's a student or a mentor. A lot of times, for myself at least, I'm the coach on 9:30, and I say, okay, well, everybody goes at me, meaning that if there's issues in a match, if anything goes wrong, I'm the one that takes the heat, and I shield, all the rest of the drivers. And then I can have my own pouty match in there, pouty time in the corner if things didn't go right. Yeah, it's good to, and a lot of times that feedback is good. You don't want to just say don't tell us anything, right? Either. People in the stands are going to have a much clearer view of things. They're going to be able to see and pick up wow, when we saw on the opposite side, this robot was trying this thing out and it worked really well. They had, their partners were playing counter defense and it worked super great. You want to know those things. It's just finding the right way to get that info in. I often, try and leave the drive team to as little as possible. So have that stuff planned out. And I think what Dilpert was getting at the last one there is just remember as you guys are going into competition, everybody's a volunteer there. I have to remind myself of that sometimes too when, you're getting pinned by a robot and the ref's 1, 2. I'm come on, learn how to count. And I gotta calm down. You don't want to be that guy that gets a yellow card for yelling at a ref or another team, especially on practice day. Don't do that. It's no good. All right, at the event, what does your drive team do? Hopefully they go to the driver's meeting. If you don't, it's gonna be a sad time. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Asking questions, that's the whole point of the driver's meeting, to ask questions. Keep in mind that also, I think most refs and FTAs are pretty good about this, but the whole point of Thursday at competition is to ask questions. So if there's some questions you've got and you're I don't know if I want to ask that in front of everybody. At any point during Thursday's practice matches, you can go out there, you can talk to the head refs, you can talk to the FTAs about field stuff. It's important. Definitely if there's any gotchas or any kind of weird things, make sure that you get that time. Just be smart about your questions. Don't ask like if you can reach into your robot in the middle of the match to clear a cargo out, like a team did at one of our events. And we went, interesting question. Probably going to be no. It was wild. Anyways, Minnesota's a crazy place. Practice matches. Just make them. That's like nothing else. Make your practice matches. You only get guaranteed typically 3. Typically 3 is what you'll get at Thursday. It's difficult, right? Thursdays are stressful. Oftentimes you're rebuilding half of your robot and you need to get inspected. You got all this stuff that you got to do. As best you can, you need to prioritize getting out there. Not only so that you can like get your robot connected to the field, make sure that it works, but just from one match out there, you may learn, wow, we tried to drive and the robot just fell apart on the field. That's not good. Now we have time to fix it. You don't want to find that out during your first quals match. That's a good like Thursday thing to do. And again, especially like we talked about earlier, like practicing full field stuff, doing the full like autonomous, then 2 minutes 15 with the end game. Just doing that once or twice on Thursday is incredibly valuable. So that if you've got, especially any new drivers, this is their first time out there, they go through the whole process. They kind of get out those first match jitters, and you're ready to go. Definitely recommend, joining the filler line, get inspected, be able to go out there and fill in. I feel like at this year's competition, I feel like teams overall were a lot better about that. I feel like in years past, at least when I was a student on a team, it was very much like end of Thursday, and there was a ton of teams still not inspected. I feel like in Wisconsin Regional this year, a lot of teams were inspected like right away, which is great. Except for them were like, darn, now there's everybody else is trying to get in the filler line too, just like us. Last piece on here at the event is like keep your drive team stress-free as much as possible. It's a challenge, right? Oftentimes your drive team, like they're the dedicated people, they're the talented people. That Venn diagram oftentimes overlaps with like your lead programmers, your lead designers, your lead, electromechanical folks who are in there fixing the robot. And so you're most qualified to drive the robot and you're most qualified to fix the robot and work on improvements often are the same people. As best you can, you try and separate those out. If your driver is thinking in the match about like, oh, if I break this, how am I going to have to fix it? What am I going to have to take off? How much time do I have? That's way too much that they're thinking about during a match. All they should think about is, how do I win this match? And if I break the robot, somebody else will fix it. That's okay. So, the rest of your team, you need to be set up for, cool, after a match, you've got that part of your technician, right? They're the ones like looking at that stuff. Your pit crew, you get some good people in the pit ready to fix it. Keep your drive team, as low stress as possible. I always make sure that like they have some time to just go sit in the stands, just kind of decompress. Keep them healthy. Honestly, my biggest job as coach / lead mentor is making sure that people eat and drink. Eat and drink at competition. It's the worst. As someone who used to be that person who, as a student, I'm like, I can eat lunch later. I got to work on the robot. No, you're going to get dehydrated and pass out. You need to drink water. You need to eat lunch. That's probably the most like firm I have to be with my team. It's like, no, stop working and eat food. But it is important. If you don't eat all day and you go out to try and drive a match, you're gonna be like woozy and cross-eyed as you're trying to drive. That's not good. All right, we're gonna talk a little bit about match strategy prep. Match strategy is super important. I feel like that's probably pretty obvious, but a lot of teams, some teams just go out there and go, oh, we're just going to drive the robot. We're just going to do whatever. It's all about, this plays hand in hand with what Aiden talked about earlier with, capturing good scouting data. You need solid numbers in order to know what teams are going to do, what teams are capable of doing. Not what they say they can do, what they actually can do. Try and do it, before you get into queue. Go around in the pits 5, 6, 7 matches ahead of time. Find your alliance partners, talk to them then while everybody's still got a little bit of time left in there. Don't left his note in there. I do the same thing of you talk to all the teams ahead of time, and then you talk again in queue, and you just like refresh on the plan. Like, what are we doing? Keep your egos in check. There's another slide after this. I'll go more into that, but just we're all here to have fun. Keep it gracious professionalism on display. Off from that. The last couple bullets on here are just some of the more details of like make sure you're talking to the right person. So often when you're going, you should if you walk up to the pit, don't just find the first person you see and be like, cool. So what are you guys gonna do in this match? And then their mascot's like, I don't know, dance in the sands. Woo! Ask for like either their drive team or someone to talk strategy. Often you say, hello, I am here to talk about our strategy because we're in the next match together. You could usually get directed to the right person. And like, you should show up with a plan. Maybe everybody's got a plan, and then you guys just compare plans. You're like, I like your plan, and here's my plan, and everyone's got a plan. That's cool. Better than nobody having any plan. I'd rather have more plans than no plans. So a few of the, diving into the details, plan out your autonomous. Make sure you know what everybody's autonomous is going to do. The last thing that you want to do is have two robots like colliding paths in autonomous and bumping into each other. That's not good. Oftentimes, it's good to plan out routes and zones in the field. Depends on the game a little bit. This year's was, I'd say like kind of half and half, or like 50-50. Sometimes it was, you kind of stayed on like the sides of the field, or it was like close side, far side. But being more open of a field this year was a little bit easier to kind of just, like oftentimes that's what I found. We would talk, say, oh yeah, left side or right side, and then teams would just go wherever there was cargo. It just kind of ended up that way. Different times, like 2019 is probably a better example where it was like, all right, well you can only have one robot on the opposite side of the field. Who's it going to be? And then a lot more often to stay like left and right. Also applies to your human players. You don't want like a disagreement or just confusion of whose human player is going where. This year, again, with like one on each side, it was pretty much who's going to go in each spot, easy day. But other times where there's like any kind of handoff, like 2020, right? Who's going to be grabbing the power cells out of the return? Who's going to be putting them in the rack? Who's feeding them in? You don't want a robot to show up to the feeder station and everyone's like, I don't know who's supposed to give game pieces here. Have your end games planned out as well. We had times where that bit us because we didn't plan it well. But where are you going to line up? What times are you going to go? Especially because if there's any kind of interaction. This year, there kind of was of making sure if somebody's going to climb, let's say up to traversal, and somebody's going to climb behind them, you need to have that person up to traversal before someone can come in. So just knowing all of those things. Or even like, this year, 930 had a tall robot. We had to come into the side for the hangar zone, whereas other robots were short, could go under the front bar. And so what that allows you to do. It's also helpful to have a backup plan. So if something goes wrong, what's the backup? What's each person going to do? Is it just that one robot is going to change? Like, hey, our intake broke, we're going to switch to defense. Is there going to be like a switch? Like, you're on defense, we're going to score balls. If we break, we're going to switch. You don't need to have like 4 different contingency plans and like everything mapped out, but at least a little bit of like, all right, this happens, we'll do that, cool, and we'll figure it out. You can see from the picture that's like the strategy board. Strategy boards are awesome. I love strategy boards. I just have a nice piece of polycarb and I take a 11 by 17 piece of paper and I either laminate it or you just take shipping tape and you can write on there. And then you can keep stacking. It's like license plates or like license plate stickers. You just keep stacking them. I think I got 2018s like buried in here somewhere. But it's very it comes in very, very handy. Just of being able to point. You can go, draw things out kind of like this and draw it, even if you're just pointing to say, our robot starts here and we drive this way in autonomous. Where does your robot go? Very helpful to have something to point to while you're doing that. All right, here's like the golden rule of drive teams and just really like interacting in first. The best way to be a team that nobody wants to be with is showing up into the strategy meeting and be like, all right, so here's what's going to happen. We are going to be scoring cargo over here. You are going to be scoring cargo over there. And you are just going to play defense and stay out of our way. It happens. Probably you guys have seen that happen. And then you go back and you're like, God, I hate that team. They're the worst. I still remember, like, I've got distinct teams in here. And I'm like, it's going to take a couple years before I would like play a competition and not just think of you as that team that showed up and just tried to tell everybody what to do. Every team, I mean, you guys know this, right? Every team, you spend hours. You spend all year long, right, prepping, and like competition's the time to shine, the time to show up all of your hard work. You don't want to go in and just tell somebody like, yeah, that's cool that you just got your shooter working, but we think you'd be better in defense, so just get out of here. Always, like, you know, my approach to things is always ask. You go into a strategy meeting asking, hey, what can you guys do? What do you guys usually do? That's often how I'll ask, like, what do you usually do for autonomous? What do you do for this? And then you work together. If all three teams say like, oh yeah, we all try and start autonomous in the same spot, you don't have to just say, all right, let's all try that because it's fun and great. No, you still work together to find a good strategy that works with everybody. It's cooperative, right? You ask by asking, you're getting input, you're getting a lot better buy-in from other teams. And it's a lot less likely than that team is going to tell you in the meeting, yeah, sure, we'll do that. And then out on the field, they just do whatever the heck they want anyways and end up with a whole mess out there. So basically, go into meetings, open-minded, ask people, still have your own plans, you could still say like, we were thinking about this, we were thinking about having you guys play defense, is that something you'd be open to? You know, asking in that kind of way is going to get a lot better buy-in from the other teams. And then you'll be a team that people want to play with because, oh yeah, that team, they were really nice, they were cooperative in the match. And who knows, you may help give them like their best match of the day. You know, it might be a struggling team that hasn't been doing very well, and you can work together, form a good strategy with them, and give them a moral victory, hopefully in addition to a victory in points. All right, couple last other things here. One is like, know your robot. As the drive team, you are the closest to your robot. The driver, the co-driver, like you should have gotten enough practice. You know what it feels like, right? When you drive, you know how well it starts, how well it stops, how well it turns. If something happens like that, your first thing to do should be like raise the red flag. That, hey, something doesn't feel right here. For better or worse, in 2019, our driver, like hands down one of the best drivers I've ever worked with. Like the whole season, our drivetrain was just screwed up, and he just drove through it. It did an awesome job, but at the end of the season, we're like, Devin, why did you never tell us that the drivetrain like pulls to the left? And he's like, I don't know, I just dealt with it. I'm like, tell us next time and we can look at it and try and fix it. So it's those types of things, like if you're in a match and normally you can pick up this ball and suddenly it doesn't pick up right, that's a good sign to take a look at that. That's your technician should be looking for that. But tell that to other teams as well, and your pit crew, other folks on the team to come look. There's that note about the technician. They should be watching, making sure that that if they see anything, they're writing it down. It gets addressed. And then also like just kind of that planned process, right? Of like what happens after matches. Make sure that your drive team's got like they know the right people to go talk to say, hey, something felt bad about this. It's also good to know, like, to describe it. If you just say, oh yeah, it was weird. Okay, what does that mean? We could spend like 2 days trying to fix something that feels weird. So be as descriptive as you can. If you're on the drive team and you see something like, say, oh, it felt like it was turning slower, or like the intake wasn't going down as fast as it normally does. Those types of things will help your pit crew narrow in on what part of the robot's broken and where they need to address that. This is a little bit about like review after matches. So after matches, it's sometimes it's annoying, or sometimes you don't really feel like it, especially if it was like a bad match and you lost, or like you made some mistakes. You're like, I want to just forget about it, move on to the next one. But it is important to review that. That's how you're going to get better. So a couple key things, like you should look at the scores, figure out like, cool, did we lose by a couple and we had a good strategy and we were just up against a really good alliance? Did we get just totally demolished and like our strategy didn't work at all? Or we tried to do our strategy and something happened and we just totally deviated? Like those are the types of things that you should be looking at after the matches. Feel free to use the question box. Giant asterisk. It's like use at your own discretion. Mileage may vary with the question box. A lot of times, the refs are busy. They're calling things. If they put in a foul and you go, hey, what was that foul for? Even right after the match, they may not remember what it was for. So, it's hit or miss, but still, if there's something you're unsure of, use the question box. That's why it's there. This is one that Ferrodermis does. They've got somebody who just takes video of just their robot throughout the whole match. Actually, our partners in 2019 at Champs, like they had 3 people, and they would record for each one of the robots in the alliance. And after our first quarterfinals match, I just got handed a tablet by a Canadian guy, and he's like, "Here you go." I'm like, "What is this?" "Oh, it's just a video of our robot on a tablet. That's cool." And then the whole point of this is that you can, you've got video evidence, right? Especially to the last slide about, hey, if something's not working right, now you've got a video, you can go look, oh yeah, you're right, it did keep like slipping when it tried to pick up the cargo or something like that. You've got that. You can watch from like the perspective. Sometimes you see things when you rewatch that you didn't before, or from a different perspective. Maybe you in the driver's station, like robot went back around the hub and something happened. You're like, I don't know, I didn't see it. You can get that with this video. So it's some teams do this, not every team does it, but they'll go right after the match, take that video, go off to the side. The drive team watches it. They kind of do a quick debrief of what happened, and then they can take that and move on. I know for Whitewater, like the person who does this is somebody who's knowledgeable about the robot, about the strategy, so that as they're videoing it, and then they're working with the drive team to review it afterwards, they can give them some educated feedback on like, oh yeah, I know that our strategy going into this was to do X, Y, Z. Here's where I think it fell apart, or here's where I think we had an issue. All right, so just some final thoughts to wrap us up here. I think I'm actually pretty good on time. The drive team is one of the most critical parts of competition. There's a lot of critical people at competition. We tell everybody, everyone has a role, but the drive team is like all the heat's on them for that 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It's up to the whole team to set them up for success, right? They need to work hard. The drive team practice all those. The team needs to support around them. Match strategies are just astronomically important to winning. A good strategy will beat better robots. You can have 3 average robots and beat some really good robots if you've got a better strategy. And make sure that you're set up for success the whole season long. Get your right drive team. Make sure that you're prepped before the competition starts. Go out there and execute. Just an interesting way to look at things, and this applies to your drive team, to your pit crew, to everybody that's involved. We pay between $3,000 and $5,000 to go to a competition. Even if you say like, oh yeah, we're gonna end up playing through all the finals and all the extra matches and that, every single match is like $300 that you're paying, or $500 or something like that. Sometimes more, $800 if you only play a handful of matches. And so you want to make every single one of those count for all of your hard work, right? Of fundraising, getting sponsors. Like, you paid a lot of money, you worked really hard to get out here. The drive team and the whole team needs to make sure that you're as prepared as possible for that match each and every time. Go out there and don't have a silly thing happen. Don't have wheels fall off your robot. Don't have your battery fall out. But also make sure that your robot, your drive team is ready to work that robot. One last thing I'll throw on here for like Post-competition is very important too. A lot of teams these days go to multiple competitions, and so what we try to do after each regional is we'll kind of like the post-match recap, but like through the whole competition. We'll sit with the drive team and we'll queue up all of our matches, and we'll just kind of go one by one through them and and take notes, because you can do that in a way that like it's in your classroom. You're I don't know, get some pizza or something. You can be a little bit more relaxed as you review these. And you really do see some key things. Like we watched after our first regional this year, and one of the first things we saw in like the first two matches was we would line up and then we would shoot both of the cargo, and then we would just sit there for like 4 seconds, and then we would start to go. And we watched a match, we watched another match, and we went, "Hey Josh, every time you shoot the ball, are you waiting to see if it goes in before you then drive the robot?" And we realized, yeah, that's what was going on. So one of the key things we got out of the first regional was, as soon as the ball leaves the robot, we're on to the next thing. Don't sit there and be a spectator and watch it. Amongst lots of other things about like, we would watch and say, hey, that was a really good, like, we line up and quickly shoot, or that was a not so good one. Very, very helpful. You can get through all of those matches when it's less stressful after a competition. All right, so I just rattle through all kinds of things.